Hello world, welcome to the Pocket Gamer Podcast with your hosts, me, Brian Baglow, and our hostess of Hogmanay as we edge into 2025, Peggy and Salz. Hello Peggy, how are you?
I am fine, and Brian, you know, that is one of the things on my bucket list is to be in Scotland for New Year's Eve. So you got me there.
We'll make it happen. It's like once we actually get Pocket Gamer into the sort of, not just the top of the charts, but the award-winning record-breaking category, which is our plans for 2025, we'll have a celebratory party here for New Year 2026. So there we go. There's a goal to aim for.
All on the books, Brian, all on the books. That's why we've brought together the best of the best, right? I was thinking end of the year, what are we going to do? And we're going to be different. Other people do a wrap and they're just like, this is what happened. No, this is not just what happened. This is what matters because it'll help you, our audience, our listeners take on the challenges and the opportunities coming up in 2025. So put together, ta-da, that was a very cool name. And I think you do too. I think it's in your vibe, Brian. The 7 Habits of Incredibly Effective Gaming Jedis Special Edition.
Perfect. It's like, who doesn't love a Jedi, apart from Sith Lords, but they're not welcome on this podcast. We're normally quite inclusive, but no, sorry, Sith Lords, but not here. No, so it's great. It's great. Rather than just here are our favourite bits or here are the, what stood out to us. What is it that people have been getting excited about? Who's been bringing the really deep learning and the most incredible opportunities to hear from the experts, pioneers, and, the people who are building this sector as it continues to grow and evolve?
Yes, and we do have them because I did deep methodology here, right? I took a look at
as
all
always.
Of those, as always, as I am a bit of a data diva. No, but seriously, I looked at the most views, but I thought, okay, most views just means people click and they look and they go. So I averaged that, a little bit of a little algorithm, a little help from my friends at ChatGPT. Also looked at the longest views, right? So our audience was riveted to the screen for a reason. So put them together and we have pure gold lessons and learnings, 7 of them on this episode, which is of course showing that one, we were on the mark with what we said and who we spoke with on our show, for sure. So I think that's just a great testament to our work together, Brian, and the value that we bring, because these aren't just any interviews.
Well, that's exactly it, Peggy. Every time we bring somebody onto the show, I learn something, I'm sure you learn something, and it gives our audience such a huge amount to take away. So we're not just, commenting on trends or giving people our thoughts. We're pulling in the real experts and letting people learn from the best of the best. And I think that's reflected in what's been going on this year. So if you look at the numbers, the data for the Pocket Gamer podcast and our companion show, The Week in Mobile Games, a shout out to Craig, Paige, Aaron and the team. Every week we're bringing new content to the world and the numbers reflect that. So we've grown by something like 140% in terms of followers, well over 225% in terms of listeners, well over 270% in terms of streams, and we're listened to in 50 countries with our friends in the US of A leading the charge. So hello to everybody listening in the United States. And we are, of course, thanks to, the trouble that we go to make sure that we're framed and that we're lit and that we're gorgeous, we're in the top 15% of video podcasts on Spotify. So, Peggy, we're kicking butt.
I would say that. That's exactly the words for me here. We're crushing it, Brian. We're crushing it. And we'll continue to, but also humble because it's all about the guests. It could be about us because you've got, your great look and your printed shirt and me, I'm always going to be a little bit over the top and orange, but it's about them. So let's get to them. Okay. And we'll kick it off with number 7. Number 7 is Innogames' strategy to extending the lifespan of legacy games. So very important now when you have to think of doing more with less. And that was key takeaways from Matthew Milligan, Torsten Schunken, and Stefan Flinterhof. We had them all together. We had the entire ecosystem on one show.
We don't rest on our laurels. We introduce new stuff that engages the players again, and I think that's a really good mixture. And just to illustrate that, although we are the oldest game at Innogames portfolio, we have the youngest demographic. Our players are the youngest of all the games, which is amazing. But the mean age of our players is around 37 years, and when you count back 20 years, you were back then you were 14, 15, 16, you were in school, you played with your friends, and I think you can come back now after 20 years and then finally you have the money that you didn't have as a pupil probably and start investing in the game. And I think, as I said, this mixture of nostalgia and keeping the game fresh really helps.
What were the key elements that they were talking about for you?
We had data, we had marketing, we had product together. So one key takeaway is exactly that, aligning product and marketing for longevity, because they did it. They wrote that playbook.
There's a lot in there. Pretty much every single person listening, regardless of their role, regardless of the company they're working for, running their own company in the games world, there was something there for them to take away.
And your takeaway, Brian? What was that?
I really liked what they were talking about in terms of adapting legacy games to new audiences, because Tribal Wars is decades old, and so they talked about embracing nostalgia and how you can sort of bring players back who maybe played 10, 20 years ago, and using old creatives but trying to make everything old new again. And really encouraging that re-engagement, because for a sector that has produced so many tens of thousands of games in the last sort of 40, 50 years, Peggy, we really suck at the long tail. There are so many companies out there. It's always about moving on to the new thing and on to the next thing.
Yes.
And building that kind of hugely influential community of people that takes in the boomers, the millennials, the Gen Zs, the cynical Gen Xs like myself, and I'm sure you. I think they're doing something really interesting.
It was. And so the takeaway, the habit here is nostalgia meets innovation. It's all about balancing the familiarity of your legacy game with fresh updates, keep players engaged, keep relevant, attract new audiences, live longer. I was going to say live longer and prosper, but no, live longer.
Live long and prosper. It works.
Live long and prosper. That works. And that is the lesson.
Although we are now mixing the genres, we're mixing the Trek and the Wars. We're going to get complaints, Peggy.
We're going to get complaints, but it's good. It's a mashup.
Coming in behind them at number 6, we have Tripledot Studios' Akin Babaygit on understanding the business behind great games.
So initially when we started, we said, we are not the most creative people in terms of coming up with the next gaming mechanic or something like that. We are really good operators. We understand data-driven product management. We understand digital marketing. We understand user acquisition. We understand monetization. And we felt that there was a need for a company like that to really focus on those aspects of gaming.
What did you take away from this one, Peggy?
Well, I met him a few times. He's moved on, by the way. He's just amazing, and it was a privilege to have him on the show. So, Akin, I would have to say it's your lessons in leadership, because it's not just about leading a company; it's also leading a team. And very important was an objective perspective for clear decision making regarding investment and pivoting and data and understanding, because if you're going to create a long-term legacy, if that's what you want to do, then you blend your product excellence with smart business practices. In other words, you kill your babies when you have to, but only when the data tells you to. What was your takeaway?
But it kind of touches on yours, and for me, Akin was talking about the lessons in leadership. So don't get dragged into what the team maybe think about the game, or what individuals with the team think are the sort of the key elements, the key hooks. Use the data, and if you can do that, then the other point you mentioned was building a sort of a truly generational company. So Tripledot's ambition is to create a long-term legacy. So it's not just product excellence and individual titles, but it's smart business practices. It's looking at this as a business, and that's a perspective that I think can often run afoul of people in the games world because they go, we're artists, we're creatives, it's not just for the guys in suits, man.
Yeah.
But without the guys in suits, you're not going to get to game number 2 or game number 3 or get that kind of legacy. So, you have to be able to balance the two. And I think he made the point really succinctly, really well.
Yes, indeed. So I would sum it up as this being the view that details are the product, data matters, pay attention to details to ensure quality and competitiveness, and also to measure those risks, because you can take risks and you can gain share in a competitive category if, again, you understand the data. So that's his habit, that's his passion, works for me.
Absolutely. And thanks again, Akin. It was a great episode.
Indeed.
Moving on, what's number 5, Peggy?
This wasn't a surprise, actually. This is one I enjoyed personally a lot because just the title got me, right? I mean, I think we got curiosity views first, and then we got longer watching when people said, wow, relevant too. So, unicorns, camels, and hogs. A shout out to Patrick McSteen here, the man who brought us that. How smart ad monetization saves your app from getting eaten alive.
There's a thing I'm writing that is probably going to be called unicorns, camels, and hogs.
Okay.
Everyone wants to be a unicorn, right? Like the startup that just goes forever. Now, camels in this context have been described to me as don't need a lot of food, don't need a lot of water, can do an awful lot of work, and live for a really long time. That sounds like a pretty good business to be in. If you can't be a unicorn, make sure you're a camel. And then hogs, there's this other metaphor, pigs might get fat, but hogs always get slaughtered, right? Like hogs don't last. Okay. Like they take a lot of resources in and then it's over. The idea is just to force people to think about making money along the way.
What was your key takeaway? What kind of struck you most?
So he went into a lot of myths and misconceptions about ads, which I thought were important because, again, we have a lot of people in our audience who are like, ads, no, I don't want them. I don't want them in my game. They'll alienate my players. No, you can do it if you do it thoughtfully. But what stood out for me was also rewarded ads because they are here. It is an alternative UA channel. And he spoke about it in great depth and saying, okay, you can do rewarded really well if you have a player-first approach. So it's about optional engagement. Users can watch ads to gain some in-game awards, and those rewards should also be personalized. So, maybe a longer-term player gets a different type of reward, but it all comes together with having that as a mechanic, but also saying you have it. So again, something as simple as highlighting the ad button with simple animations or notifications. Offer rewards and show that you're offering rewards.
See, it was such a good point. I thought he made it very well, and it kind of really touches on what I took away from that, which was embracing ad monetization as a core part of your game. Yeah. Far too many game developers are hesitant to implement ads, or if they have to have ads, they kind of they take a cursory approach, which is we'll just put it in there and they'll have an ad, and then they can get on with the game, which is the fun bit, which is my responsibility, rather than looking at where and how they implement it and working with that as part of the design and development of their game, because that can have a massive impact on user experience. And Patrick, for me, really sort of encouraged and, I think inspired studios to reframe their approach and integrate ads thoughtfully, and use it as a tool and part of their overall design.
It was fun. It was insightful. I think he has a book in there. And if I had to summarize that habit, it's like focus, 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 right? Many studios fail to invest the necessary time and resources into their ad strategy, which means you're not going to make money. You're going to have suboptimal results. He's an advocate for treating ad monetization as a key revenue driver. And so are we, I think, Brian.
Oh, it's great. And obviously we already have the title for the book. It's like, if it's not going to be unicorns, camels, and hogs,
it's gotta be.
Then we're going to have some serious words with them. But it was beautifully put, and we'll have to welcome him back on the show once the book is out.
No pressure, Patrick.
No pressure, Patrick.
Seriously, he's on.
We're just saying there's a holiday coming up. You've got a lot of free time on your hands.
There you go. So, where are we on number 4? What's the next one?
This was a good one as well. How one studio stays successful when shift happens. And we do love, some mild innuendo on the show, so this was all good. But these were findings from Ryan Filsinger, CEO of Iron Fox Games.
What do you do when a key revenue source or a key personal source in the company disappears?
One of the things that we did, or one of our perspectives when we started Iron Fox, was to always, what we called, have a bias towards action. Almost anything in a company can be redone or fixed at a later date, but not doing anything is unfixable because you didn't actually produce anything. And so in those situations that you're mentioning, finding in partners that are willing to understand the situation and the times was a massive help to us.
It's the fact that he was willing to come on and be brutally honest and raw about where they got things right, where they got things wrong, which is always nice because people learn from mistakes, even more so in some cases than they do from successes. For me, Peggy, when he spoke about building and leveraging relationships, it really spoke to me in my time in the games industry, because I see so many people who will go to shows and they'll hang out and they'll have a perfectly lovely time, but they won't necessarily talk to anybody they haven't known for the last decade. And while it's perfectly lovely and everybody has drinks and they have a great time, building those relationships, nurturing those relationships over time can be hugely beneficial in helping you and your business to grow and build strong foundations of friends, colleagues that you can rely on when you are uncertain, when you hit those periods of volatility and when you need help.
That's so true. And it worked out for him. He gave us examples of how that helped him in his business, both having the right relationship, having the right people in his team, but also being able to draw on those supportive relationships when his studio was in trouble. So my favorite, he has a bias toward action. I thought that was really something, just action. Even imperfect action is action. And delaying decisions results in stagnation. And he showed us that, right? His own studio, Iron Fox, they faced setbacks, and he put together a short-term project to sustain the business. This was proactive. This was just act, do it, and it brought the company through. They were able to secure larger, longer-term deals. So bias toward action, that stood out.
Yeah, but the other thing for me was he also said celebrate success. Recognize achievements. If you get a certain number of downloads, or a game comes back, there's no bugs. Keep everything positive, celebrate success, and just make sure that you're taking your team with you. It'll get you through some tough times if everybody believes in what you're doing and you can find those small wins.
I'm glad that was one of our top shows because it's not going to be an easy year, Brian. We need to have this. So yes, everyone should go back, watch it again if you haven't already, write down because the lessons are real.
Heartily recommend it. Absolutely. Which brings us very neatly, Peggy, to number 3.
Number 3 was early on in the year. I was like, oh, wow, this is something, because this was quite early on when we started interviewing some of the top studios to just understand their philosophy rather than the metrics, right? So number 3, ustwo Games, Maria Sayans, on the sustainable strategy behind the monumental game, which is, of course, Monument Valley. And she was amazing. I just love her spirit to start off with.
Our games always come from a very personal place, and it's one of our pillars, our product pillars, is that they are made by people. Now, when we named that pillar, we were not thinking of AI. We were just thinking about the fact that they come from a personal place as opposed to just a market research that identifies a space in the market to be filled. But it comes from personal inspiration. Who knows, eventually the fact that they're made by people will come to be a differentiator in other ways. But that's definitely a theme that's going through all of our games. But we don't stop there. We then very quickly turn the spotlight onto the player, and we say, okay, this thing that comes from a very personal place, how is it universal?
So it stood out for me, Brian. You hear about wallet share all the time. You even hear about mind share all the time. But how about heart share? And she makes games from the heart, and she proves that you can and succeed at the same time, because it's all about player connection over market-driven formulas. Yes, we do know we need to be data-driven. We heard that already. But games are also successful that are made by people, for people, emphasizing authenticity, personal inspiration. So a shout out to that amazing episode, because it was real. It was showing what impacts resonates across diverse audiences, and also, if you do it right, transforms your game into a success.
I loved talking to Maria. I think she was a fantastic, not just guest, but a figurehead for the industry. And the fact that they're doing so much in terms of focusing on their people, they're a B Corps, they're really taking that philosophy to heart. And when she talked about leadership for creativity, I was genuinely inspired. Maria said that her role is about creating space for talented teams to do their best work, which I don't think anyone can possibly disagree with.
And her habit, I think, if we sum it up, is changing to stay the same, is what I've written down in my notes, because I think it's about looking at the process. You preserve the core identity of the game, but you still adapt to other markets, cultural shifts, even other platforms. They're not just on PC, console, they're everywhere. Netflix, obviously, also another. So it's just that adapting, but staying true to your roots.
This is it. Don't change the goal, change the milestones. Perfect.
Absolutely. So we're getting to the end here. Number 2, Brian, what do we have?
Number 2. No, number 2 was one of these ones that's really granular, and on paper you think, is this going to be interesting? And oh my God, it was. So this was Multiscription's Teis, Anker, Mikkelsen on scaling subscription models across gaming platforms. Yes, we're talking subscription, folks.
Netflix was mentioned earlier, and the benefit of that is that it has something for everyone in the family, so everyone can sort of understand why we need to get the subscription. For us, it's primarily a value add for the games, that they can be bigger than they are by themselves. I think that's a challenge. So being able to bundle it with other titles is just a nice thing for consumers. We all have a loss aversion, which is why we might not subscribe, because we think we might not continue to play the game. But if there are other games in the service, then the loss aversion goes away, because in your mind you're thinking, hey, I can always just play one of the other games if I stop playing this game. So that I think that's really the strength of putting it into a bigger network.
At the heart of it, rather than being simply a business model or a revenue stream, Teis talked about subscriptions as relationships, not transactions, which, I'll be honest, I hadn't really thought of before. But it's down to building trust. Subscription models require ongoing value delivery for the player. You've got to be giving them something that they find valuable. Players subscribe based on faith in future benefits. They trust you to deliver and give them things that they're going to want and bring them joy. And so you have to meet, if not exceed, those expectations to maintain that loyalty. And that lets you build, sort of point number 2 for me was this long-term engagement. So subscribers are members, not customers. They're coming back. They're your hardcore fans. They're the committed ones. And so you have to find ways to consistently reward that commitment with exclusive benefits and just making them feel special.
And in the case of his own model, Multiscription's own model, which is their Unleashed model, it's about, bundling value. It's multiple games, one subscription. So again, it's like in the early days of mobile content, which you will remember, Brian, it was always the bundle. The bundle wins. Mm-hmm. It wasn't the one thing, it was how you put them together. And all of these different ways that you can attract and retain subscribers by giving them alternatives in one thing. When one interest wanes, we've got another for you. So I think it was about doing it in an intelligent way. It's not, as you always say yourself, Brian, actually, flexibility, not one size fits all. I think that came across really strong.
It made so much sense to me, Peggy. It really did. And the two key things for me, it was subscription as a commitment, not just for the player, but for the developer. It's not just a revenue stream, it's a relationship. You have to keep both sides happy. And to do that, you really need to focus and drill down on your data and your personalization, understanding and adapting to player preferences, surveys, feedback loops, looking at, their usage patterns, and then building on that to give them something special.
And I think the takeaway is really think about the engagement, prepare to engage. Subscription models require ongoing player communication, support. As you said yourself, it's the value players gain from subscribing that has to be super clear. And then you will be super successful with the subscription model. It is coming. It is here. We're going to hear more about it in 2025 and maybe even have Teis back again to tell us about how subscriptions have evolved.
That brings us to the top show from this year. It's like in terms of views, in terms of the length of those views, by every metric, this was our most popular show of the year. Peggy, who was it? Don't keep us hanging on.
It was a surprise, actually, Brian. It really was a surprise for me. It is, at the end of the day, it is insights from a vendor. And you think sometimes in our industry, that's like, but, that's okay. But no, these were truly insightful because they're based on data from a top platform. AppLovin's Daniel Tchernahovsky on the hot gaming trends worth tracking.
You build progression. You limit progression, you speed it up in relation to how the users want to engage with the product. That's certainly one thing. The other one is also the complexity. Let's say, Peggy, the two of us play a match 3 game. Why should the level 2 for you and me be the same? Based on how I behaved in level 1, level 2 should look different. You can customize more and more because the goal really is to create experiences that feel tailored to you. You want a game experience where it feels this is just my level of difficulty. And that's something that we're seeing more. Like I've talked to companies who are saying they build literal ML models to use past behavior to decide what type of block or stone or whatever it is will come up next for every single user. And that they use to increase retention. Like it can go pretty deep.
We did this at the start of the year, which tells me, shout out to you, Daniel. I think we have to have you back again to do it at the start of this year because people loved these trends. And you know what? He was on the money, Brian. We weren't talking about it as much, and now you heard it at all the conferences. His number one takeaway for me, embrace hybrid monetization. It's the new normal. It's the convergence of ad-driven and IAP-based monetization. This is it. This is the way to maximize your revenue stream and still stay competitive. And also bringing in rewarded, because that's part of it, balance those ads with engagement. So he gave us like a monetization roadmap, which I think was great to start the new year with.
Oh, massively, Peggy, massively. And it's one of these things that again, we hear about it in so many different forms, but having it stated so boldly up front, it's like, this is how it's working.
So that was my takeaway. What was it for you, Brian? What was it that stood out?
For me, it's all about the data stupid. So I'm not calling you stupid, Peggy, but you know that we're both data geeks. And when he's talked about leveraging data, segmenting your players and making sure that you understand your players' behavior and use that to identify your high value players, design experiences for those people. But unless you know who your players are and how to actually split them up into the whales, the dolphins, the minnows, the camels, the goats, the hogs, you're not going to be getting the most out of them and you're not going to be making them happy. And that kind of fed into hyper-segmentation. And so, again, being able to sort of act on that segmentation means that you are maximizing the value of every player. It gives you the opportunity to make every player happy.
That mindset is adapt or decline, really. It's all about, you say it again all the time, Brian. I mean, you're just going to be like the motto of 2025. Change is constant. So studios have to embrace new trends, new tools, new consumer behaviors. It's all about thriving in a hyper competitive environment. That means you have hyper segmentation and you have a hybrid monetization strategy. This is the way it works.
It's been an incredible year, Peggy. It's been volatile. It's been exciting. It's been terrifying. I think it pretty equally. Who knows what 2025 is going to bring? But the one thing I can honestly say is that we have spoken to some of the brightest and best and most creative people that the mobile games world has to offer.
It's like almost like a hobby for me. Everyone can go to where the action is, and I will polish, maybe it's because I'm from Pennsylvania, but I will polish coal and look for diamonds. I know that people who are working hard have a lot to say, a lot to share, but they're not necessarily our industry rock stars. We are also marking our second year, Brian. How about that?
It can't be. It can't be. Really? A full 2 years of the PG team bringing you the podcast. It doesn't seem like half that amount, Peggy. It doesn't even seem like 6 months. It's every time we get together, we have all of these incredible conversations. It seems like we're starting afresh.
It does indeed. I mean, I enjoy it. I look forward to continuing it. And we have some great shows that are still going to close out the year. But I have to say, this one, Brian, just being able to sit and chat with you and have a deeper discussion, really enjoyed it. And I look forward to having more of them as well.
Oh, well, listen, Peggy, I'm with you. It's actually been quite nice not having to wrangle the guests and, write questions for them. So that's always a joy. And right back at you, Peggy. I hope you have a fantastic end of the year. I'm in Scotland, so we obviously do Hogmanay. So the end of the year is always utterly fantastic. I'm told. I don't remember many of them, but that's okay. It means we'll be back refreshed, ready to rock and roll and crush it some more in 2025.
Absolutely. Thank you, Brian. And a final round of applause for our 7 amazing, incredibly effective gaming Jedis.
Thank you, guys. May the force be with you.
This show is all about how to do your job better, how to make an amazing game, how to market it, and you have a say. So if you have a story or know someone we need to shine a light on, then we would love to hear from you.
We want to hear from you. We want to reflect the reality of the mobile games market in all its wonderful complexity and strangeness. So if you have any suggestions for us, if you have any feedback for us, you can always get in touch. You can email us at podcast@pocketgamer.biz. You can find us on Twitter @PGBiz, and you can reach out to us through the Pocketgamer.biz website. If you're interested in listening to all of our podcasts, you can find them at pocketgamer.biz/podcast, and we would love to hear your thoughts on future shows.
And we've got you covered on all the major platforms, so subscribe to the audio podcast, as Brian said. Look for us on YouTube. If you want to read it, hey, you can do that too, because we have a companion post for you as well on the Pocketgamer.biz website.
Tune in again for the next edition of the Pocketgamer.biz podcast, and we look forward to speaking to you in the near future. Until then, I'm Brian Baglow.
I'm Peggy and Salz, and that's a wrap until next week.